Good afternoon. My name is Jared Cathcart. I am a Senior Manager with Strategy and Consulting at Stoah. First of all, thank you for making this stage available for me to speak today. It's a privilege to be here. This is me. Effectively, my background and experience is in mostly the hydrocarbons and mining minerals area. Not so much in the building construction type of things. So I have to say this has been an experience for me, an eye-opening experience, very informative. And so far what I've heard in regards to the way that your industry in particular is structuring data is probably a little bit or a fair way ahead of the stuff I've experienced in oil and gas and mining. So congratulations on that, and I hope it continues, and I hope we can catch up. So I just want to make apologies in advance. So seemingly, as I am from a different industry, my terminology and initialisms and acronyms may be a little bit different, and I hope I don't confuse too many people. All right, so we'll start with Stoah. Well, let's start with what I do at Stoah. I'm a management consultant. So working with project-focused organizations, both on the engineering and construction side of things and the owner asset management side of things. And usually when I tell people where I work or where I come from, they always ask me about, does Stoah mean anything? And it does. It's actually a word, a portmanteau, I guess you would call it. But it was put together by the company founder, Jordan Cram. So Jordan Cram, based out of New York City, is a bit of a history buff, particularly Roman and philosophical history. So he put together the name, which essentially means within the Great Hall where philosophers discussed life and philosophy. So Stoah is a workplace where we encourage the discussion of ideas and questioning our current understanding of, in particular, project processes and practices, and internal collaboration is kind of the key to our success. Because while we're small, we're only about 160 people, but we're growing rapidly. We're based all around the globe. We've just been ranked by Inc. 5000, if you're familiar with that, for the 8th time in 9 years as one of the fastest growing companies in the USA. And we have experience across quite a number of industries as an organization, ranging from oil and gas, which I am more familiar with, to healthcare, real estate, engineering and construction, that sort of thing. We recently grew by acquisition. We acquired 2 companies out of the UK. One was a digital solutions company called Lifecycle Tech, and the other one is a computational BIM consultancy called Design Tech. Now, originally, I will admit that one of the Design Tech representatives was supposed to speak here today to you, but he couldn't make it, and I had to step in for him. We have established partnerships with Autodesk, Hexagon, Construction Industry Institute, and in particular Oracle. We work a lot with the Oracle project management systems, creating products and solutions which integrate them with other organizational systems. Okay, so why us, I guess? Well, we consider ourselves to have access to key experiences with emerging technologies and relevant data. And throughout our organization, we have experience across a wide range of industries, as I pointed out before. But most importantly, I think, is we manage and we put as a priority the organizational change management that comes at the end of any initiative or any implementation that we might do. Because I think, as someone mentioned earlier, really any new system, technology, or platform that you purchase and apply to your organization is really useless unless it's adequately adopted by the people that are going to use it. So What do we do? This is our tagline, but essentially we are a systems integrator for capital projects, and we consider ourselves to be the accelerated digital transformation for the built environment. We have internally developed products and services that integrate technology solutions to allow efficient delivery of capital projects within the built environment. So what does that mean? Well, basically all this is we work towards achieving a world where capital projects achieve maximum return on investment. That's kind of what our goal is. And we want people to make crucial decisions regarding project selection and project delivery to be driven by data rather than, or delivered by data and insight rather than anything else. We want technology leveraged to enable a more efficient approach to engineering and construction, and we want risks and challenges that are inherent in the built environment to be reduced through seamlessly connected, integrated solutions. And to achieve this, we are developing products and solutions to replace the slow and traditional labor-intensive or paper-based processes, which is common within the capital projects industries. And we want faster, more streamlined digital solutions. And we want the people to enable, the people to work to design, construct, and maintain the built environment and spend less time working on creating data and more time using data to make crucial and critical decisions. So that's what I'm here to talk about today, is the utilization of data. As I mentioned before, your industry seems to be more advanced than I am familiar with. This talk is a little bit of a high level introduction to our approach to what we call the holistic data environment. And it's really a talk about how to manage data on projects for construction focused organizations or project focused organizations. I don't know if you're familiar with this graph, but this is something that I sort of come back to and refer to quite often. It's US-based information, but it's practically generic across the globe. Effectively, what it tells us is it's a report card that as construction, as an industry, we have barely improved since the 1940s in terms of the value received from a person's work hour, so our productivity. This comes from 1947, but since 1947, manufacturing, for example, has increased by 8.6 times, whereas construction, we're only 10% more productive than we were some times ago. So basically it means is as construction, we wrote a bunch of processes and practices in 1947 and haven't really bothered to look at them since. So what does that mean in terms of the impact to our industry? There's 13% of GDP globally. We represent about $10 trillion worth of spend. Manufacturing has improved 8.6 times. We've done about 1.1 times since the 40s. On a yearly basis, compared to the average productivity improvements across the globe, across all of GDP, we leave about $1.6 trillion on the table because we barely improved. Okay? And so what we say, and McKinsey has basically said that poor project management and execution, insufficient skills, inadequate design processes, and we've under-invested in our development and innovation. So today what I want to discuss is that embracing a holistic approach to data management on projects and engineering and construction can hopefully break us free from the productivity plateau we've experienced in the last 10 years. So, as we mentioned, but there are many causes to this productivity improvement or lack of. But the main culprit, I think, lies in how we structure product teams, project processes, contracts, and data to develop and deliver projects. Essentially what we do is we bring together multiple companies with disparate cultures and systems and data structures. And so that on its own restricts the flow of information and data. But then due to the lack of trust and presumed risk between parties, we wrap everything up in a contract, and that further exacerbates the problem. So the cost of this impact, or the cost of this approach, is significant but often hidden and is effectively become our norm, right? So all these, the cost of this is built into our norms that we use to estimate projects. And at the project level, the CII, Construction Industry Institute, recently completed research suggesting there's a 2 to 4% efficiency, inefficiency burden at each relationship throughout the project. From owner or asset owner down to the original equipment manufacturer or material supplier. You know, we have up to 12 interface layers, which effectively means that 40% or up to 40% of overall costs is just because of the inefficiency in the relationships. So if possible, like if we could scrape back half of that, that's a major improvement. So from an owner's point of view, it's a major improvement to allow them to perform more projects. From an engineering contractor point of view, it's a major improvement into allowing them to create greater profits. So ultimately, the goal for an asset is, I'm moving through this pretty quickly, trying to make up a bit of time that we lost throughout the day. But ultimately, we're here to create an asset, all right? And that asset creates a cash flow. Initially, there's an investment in a project where we're spending money. Eventually, that project turns into a working asset and we return over time. We can improve that return on investment by squishing up the schedule, compressing the schedule. And what that does is it moves our return forward a little bit. We can also improve that by being more productive with our costs, being cheaper, saving money here and there. But ultimately, what we want to drive at is what we call operational excellence in project delivery. So what is needed is something that enables a more efficient way to communicate. And we want a more efficient way to move data and information throughout our project people and project parties, both internally and externally. There was someone up here that mentioned owner companies operating in silos. It's also not uncommon to see large engineering contractors to also operate in silos, which means you end up with another relationship barrier within an organization. So the HDE, or the holistic data environment, is something that disregards the traditional commonplace process. This is pretty common, right? Placing project management and controls at the center, pushing and pulling data through the project management and controls discipline or organization, PMO, for example, right? So you've got finance and accounting, moving cost breakdown structures, code of accounts, anything for the general ledger requirements. You've got push and pull between payment for procurement and supply chain, engineering and design coming through project management to get to construction. And then all of that eventually has to feed into operations and maintenance to run the project. The idea is that the HDE approach turns that on its head a bit and puts the digital asset at the center to create a more efficient way to translate and move data around the project or organization. I'll talk from both points of view because this is effectively a solution for both the asset owner and the engineering and construction companies. Right? And so we have estimated that if a project organization were to implement the HDE, that perfectly implement and adopt, you may be looking at being able to perform the same amount of projects with about 10 to 20% of your original overhead. All right, so that leaves, from an owner's point of view, freed resources to focus on the creative, analytic, and value-added side of their work. Or from an engineering and construction point of view, being able to produce or perform more projects. So by placing the data and the design at the center of everything, it kind of removes the control points that are traditionally found as bottlenecks in your project organization. The holistic approach allows for information to move more efficiently between departments, systems, parties, owner contracts, so owners or subcontractors. For example, project management, measurement of progress measurement in project scope and validation of activity completion can become automated without the need for manual validation. It enables the application of blockchain technology for automated and faster invoicing processes. Right? So if your invoice payment is based on the validation of the achievement of a milestone or achievement of progress, if your smart contract system has identified that you've achieved your progress, then payment is automatically authorized through the blockchain system. So rather than a separate approval process for every little thing, the technology itself allows for validation of procurement and construction events. For example, which I think we've mentioned the technology quite a lot over the last couple of days. You're talking virtual reality, AR, drones, laser scanning, etc., comparing against the approved digital asset model for validation of completion. I don't know if some of you have the same problem of convincing owner contracts from an engineering construction point of view, convincing your owner or asset manager or asset owner that you've achieved progress completion, right? Rather than having to bring into site, point at things, reference drawings, reference contracts, right? Slap a augmented reality headset on him, compare what is in front of him to the 3D digital asset that's on the cloud, right? To prove that you've achieved your progress validation, which removes the level of risk which you get from both sides. So it removes the risk to the owner that the contractor has achieved the progress that he is telling you, and it removes the risk to the contractor that you're not spending time convincing them of something that you've achieved, nor are you padding out your costs because you expect at the end of every month to be fighting tooth and nail to get your invoices paid. So, within the HDE model, everyone involved in each stage of the asset's existence, from design through to construction, operations, maintenance of the completed asset facility, has infinitely more visibility into what's happening and what has happened up until this point. So suddenly we can get a real-time sense of project progress, schedule, spend, and any changes to scope or design can be instantly visible across the entire project organization. So if you make a change to the design either before or during construction, that impact can make sweeping changes to any sourcing, construction sequencing, or installation or prefabrication requirements that you may have. And as you move on through to asset operation, you're talking about visibility into what has gone through to get this piece of equipment in place and operating, and what do we now need in order to continually service and maintain for the future. So to do this, again, this is very high level, we kind of need an asset data model that replicates everything that we're currently using, which is quite complex. Ideally, you want to be able to transfer data between parties and between and within the organization without any translation. Realistically, that's not possible, but that's the ultimate goal. So some of you may be aware that I mentioned manufacturing earlier. So the holistic approach or the digital twin approach has been applied to manufacturing, which is kind of one of the things that has allowed them to improve their productivity so much in the last decades. And the idea is to create a digital twin that contains all the data needed for making an item. Right? It contains specifications of parts, materials, and it drives the supply chain and manufacturing sequence. So if a change is introduced to the digital twin, suppliers are automatically notified, new parts automatically show up, because everybody is working from the same single source of truth. Okay? What we want to do is effectively apply this to the engineering and construction world. So the HDE approach follows the same model for construction projects. The digital twin, in this case, is the 3D model of the asset to be constructed. This is not too dissimilar to the BIM concept, and it incorporates details of equipment, materials, fabricated items, but as well as construction sequencing, required resources to perform construction activities, for example, the labor crews required, cranes, construction equipment, etc., and then all the way through to operations and maintenance requirements in the future. If a change is introduced in the design, that change can automatically flow into suppliers, fabricators, construction resources. Similarly, if a change is introduced during construction, it is then identified back to, gone too far, is shared amongst the project management framework across the project organization. And ultimately allowing you to make decisions based not on the instantaneous position that you're in, but what's the best outcome for the life cycle of our asset. So we take that HDE approach and we start layering technology, allowing for the application of smart contracts, blockchain, to enable achievement validation, progress validation, and ultimately automated payment between parties. Efficiencies which would be difficult, if not impossible, without a standardized or holistic approach to your project data management. So the problem is that this HDE approach is not just the next step in what we've been doing in the past. It's a profoundly different approach. Okay? And so to achieve this profoundly different approach, we kind of have 3 best practices that we suggest that we take into account. So the first is lead with data. Makes sense? In fact, I think almost everybody that's got up on stage so far has actually said this. So that is excellent. But lead with data and define how the people within the organization interact and use data across all functions, as well as companies. And ensure that the data model is designed and structured in a way that allows seamless data flows between parties and systems, right? It also can impact your project organization. Traditionally, we've been structuring projects in the same way for the last, 20, 30, 40 years. Now that we're centering data in the middle, and we're focusing on the asset and the data, should that not also impact the way that we structure our organizations and our people? Because ultimately, we're setting a foundation for both the digital operating model and the technology platform. Right? Secondly is place the digital asset at the center. The asset should be at the center of all transactions. As we mentioned earlier, traditional approach is to basically put the outcome of that project phase at the center. So during engineering and design, you put all your engineering and design outcomes in the center of all that you're doing, right? So all your decisions, all your data flows, all your communications is around how do we design. Then you move into construction and you're focused on the way that we're constructing, the way that we're sequencing. What do we need resources-wise to build this asset that has been designed? And at the end of the day, the asset operators come in and have to translate all that information, which was the design and the construction activities and processes, and translate it into something that they can use to operate and maintain for the next 40, 50 years. Right? So isn't it fair that we try and make their job the easiest since they have to do it for the longest? And finally, address the trust issues head on. So I mentioned earlier about the convincing your owner that you've achieved milestones. It's not uncommon. In fact, I had a discussion with a mate yesterday about a project that he's on. Contractors pulling the wool over asset owners' eyes in order to over-invoice, right? They don't know what they're looking at. They don't know the details of how the contract was supposed to be or is to be executed. So essentially, we can get more money out of this month than we deserve because we can pull the wool over the owner's eyes, right? So that puts everybody at a level of distrust. The owners know this happens. The contractors know it's possible. So everybody starts distrusting everybody. But we need to address that trust issue head on because ultimately it is best for everybody if all those contractual decisions were based on hard, irrefutable data. And so we need to define a mutually acceptable data source and business rules that is future-proof and can be automatically validated through smart contracts and other platforms. Ultimately, the purpose of going to the effort of structuring your data in a whole new way is so you can benefit from efficiencies all through the design, construction, and operating processes, or phases rather. So finally, digital asset at the center. What we've called or termed the HDE is not something that can be rolled out onto an existing project because we want to claw back overspend that we've experienced in the last 6 months. It's really a profoundly different way of executing projects that needs to be set up from day dot. It can also be argued that it's also going to impact the way that you structure your organization. And so it's not a product that can be bought, and it's not a technology system that can just be slapped onto your current processes. I really think that this is going to be a seismic change to the industry, and it's going to let us claw back that missing 7.5 times productivity discrepancy that we have with manufacturing, for example. And although it's going to be difficult and it's going to require integrated planning and basically a seismic shift from what we're used to, it's going to be an important change in the way that we deliver projects.